Should the courts allow anyone to escape their past? Recent acquittals show decades-old accusations are not easy to prove. Some say they should be left to lie.
There's an awful lot of money being spent on these cases, and what I would prefer to see happen is that the resources be devoted to current issues and current complaints.
The Director of Public Prosecutions is here to tell us why that must not happen. If justice delayed is justice denied, then perhaps crimes past should be pursued endlessly into the future. But after several cases of alleged historic sex abuse ended with celebrities walking free from court, the authorities have been accused of witch hunts and looking for scapegoats. But the Director of Public Prosecutions, Alison Saunders, has today made it plain to her prosecutors that they must press on. The date of alleged crimes should not matter. She'll be with us to tell us why in a few moments. But out of 16 arrests in Operation U-Tree, set up after revelations of Jimmy Savile's past crimes, only 4 charges have been made. So even if the intentions are laudable, are they realistic? Here's Chris Cook.
Recent front pages have been peppered with historic sexual offence trials. Bill Roach and Michael Lavelle have been acquitted, Stuart Hall convicted, and proceedings are continuing against Dave Lee Travis. Alison Saunders, the Director of Public Prosecutions, wants more old cases to come to trial. Under new guidance, prosecutors will be told not to ignore cases just because the alleged offences happened a long time ago. The decision has been welcomed by Labour.
I think that what is important is the principle, and the principle is if you have been abused, we should be able to stand up for you. You should come in and you should be believed, and we should do everything that we can to make sure that your case is proved and that you get the justice you deserve.
The guidelines apply to all crimes, but they are expected to have particular effect on sexual offences, where victims are often reluctant to come forwards.
If you were to report a burglary to the local police, you would at least expect them to believe a burglary had happened. But many victims of sexual violence don't even feel that basic level of assurance, let alone confidence that their assailants will come to court. Thankfully, things are getting better, largely because of specialist police officers who understand the sensitivities around these crimes. Even so, many victims still stay silent.
Old stigmas remain, and a senior official at the NSPCC told Newsnight that he was worried a new one might be forming. Victims have told the charity that they fear people will suspect a financial motive for making allegations. There are big unknowns here. The CPS doesn't log how many historic prosecutions it brings, nor how many are successful. And there are practical concerns too about the evidence.
We have seen with some cases so far, there is a particular difficulty for court cases which rely on nailing down evidence about what actually happened, in what time frame and in what circumstances, to then go into that many, many years, many decades afterwards. That's not something that can be wished away.
And there are worries about cost.
There's an awful lot of money being spent on these cases, and what I would prefer to see happen is that the resources be devoted to current issues and current complaints rather than those going back 30, 40 years.
Ultimately though, choosing which crimes matter the most is a political question.
In my view, the priorities should be many of the offences against women and young people that are actually the really hard cases. It seems to me that if we're not there to protect women and kids, what is the system about?
Well, the Director of Public Prosecutions, Alison Saunders, is here now to discuss this. In a sense, Emily Thornberry is right, isn't she? This is a decision, a conscious decision under political or public pressure to make up for past mistakes, isn't it?
No, it's not. We look at all cases, no matter when the allegations were, no matter when the report of the offence takes place. We look at them all in the same way. So we look at whether or not there's sufficient evidence for a realistic prospect of conviction and whether it's in the public interest to prosecute.
But if you look at them all the same way, why do you then need to tell your prosecutors they must press on with cases from historic allegations? If you looked at all in the same way, you wouldn't have to make any instruction at all.
No, but that's around the public interest. It's around reaffirming what the prosecutors already know, which is that in some cases we will look to make sure that justice is done, that victims get their day in court, and that if traditionally it has been that if there's going to be a very minor penalty imposed, that we might not go ahead. But in these cases, particularly in sexual offence cases, we should think twice about that and have a look at what the victim also wants.
But can you say, hand on heart, that you would be making this change or reminding your prosecutors of this if it hadn't been for some of the terrible revelations in the last year or so of how victims had been laughed at or dismissed?
Well, this is a consultation which has really come about because we have been looking at old cases and where allegations have been made some time, there's been a delay in making them. And I think our awareness has really changed about what makes victims come to tell their stories later, why they don't do it at the time, and really taking that into account. So we've really developed in our thinking.
But there's not very much that might make victims feel confident of that, sadly. I mean, there has been a huge increase in the number of people coming forward. Figures obtained by the BBC show that the number of historic child abuse allegations went up by 70%. But in the same time period, the number of arrests actually went down. I mean, knowing that, it's all very well you telling your prosecutors they must press on with historic abuse allegations. But how can victims possibly have any confidence in what you'll do with them?
Well, I hope they will have confidence because we prosecute a large amount of cases every year. I mean, sexual abuse cases, for example, we successfully prosecuted over 8,500 last year.
But if the numbers of arrests have gone down when allegations have gone up by 70%, that's not really good enough, is it?
No, but it shows that people are confident in coming forward.
But what happens then?
But then you still have to investigate. There still has to be the evidence that's accumulated in order to get an arrest.
But doesn't that come to the difficulty then? When you're talking about things perhaps decades ago, the evidence perhaps is harder to accumulate. Memories fade. We've seen that in some recent cases. That's a big problem, is it not?
It is a problem, but it's not a problem that's insurmountable. And it's a problem that we can also show a number of cases. The Caldecott School in Buckinghamshire, where we looked there at prosecuting, and a man was prosecuted, he was the teacher and headmaster. These took place some years ago. We have lots of cases where we prosecute successfully.
Does it not, though, also come down to a question, I'm afraid, of cash? You've recently lost a quarter of your legal staff. How can you possibly devote all the resources you need to push these cases through? Is it not better to concentrate on cases that are happening now when people are coming forward, rather than things that might be harder to get results on?
This isn't an issue about resources, this is an issue about making sure that we have the right evidence and it's in the public interest to prosecute. And the way in which we have reorganised ourselves in order to deal with the resource issue has allowed us to. So we now have 13 RASO units, rape and serious sexual assault units, so it's specialist prosecutors who are looking at these types of cases, who are trained, who know what they're doing, who are really experienced in doing it, and they really do know what they're doing.
But how can you devote extra resources to cases gone by and give equal resources to current cases that they demand when you're losing staff and losing money?
But because we've reorganised, because we're now operating in a digital way, we can use those resources that we've saved from there to put into these cases. So it's not about resources, it is about making sure we have the right evidence and it's in the public interest to prosecute them.
But do you accept, though, that prosecutions of allegations made in years gone by are much harder to get results in court?
They may be, but I don't see why victims should be treated any differently because they haven't made the allegation until now, despite the fact that they might not have been able to for a variety of reasons. So why should we penalise them again? They should be treated in exactly the same way as current allegations and current victims, which is what we do.